Thomas Jan Pedersen.
I'm a co-founder of a company called Copenhagen Atomics out of Denmark. It was founded in the end of last year. We all dream about this future where thorium energy will provide an almost unlimited amount of energy to this planet. And when we get there, every human on this planet will be able to live a decent and prosperous life. Back in December last year, when John announced this conference was going to be here, right in the center of the motherland of exponential technologies, I knew that I had to be here. Because for me, and I know many of you, and many of those watching at home, we believe that thorium has this potential to really scale up, because we know that there's enough thorium in the world for every country to supply their entire energy need for thousands of years. And we know that we can build these molten salt reactors in factories just like we build cars and airplanes. And when we do that, we are able to get the cost to come down and the quality go up. And if we can have fast enough technology cycles, we can improve the performance and minimize the waste that is generated after recycling. We're down there on the flat part of the curve, and there's quite a few roadblocks ahead of us that we need to clear out of the way before we can really see the curve bend upwards. And there's no one else to clear these roadblocks but us here in this room. Well, there are a few watching at home as well, but it's going to be us who's going to make that change. A little bit later, I'm going to tell you about 5 short stories that I think can help us remove some of those roadblocks. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Copenhagen Atomics. As I said, I'm one of the co-founders. It's a company that was formed last year, but several of us have been working on thorium energy for many years before that. Currently, we are 15 people in the team, mostly scientists and engineers, and some of the team members are faculty of Technical University of Denmark. And the dream that we came together around last year was that we think it's essential, if we want a new nuclear era in this world, it's essential that we demonstrate to the public that it's possible to handle the nuclear waste problem, both from the old type of reactors, but also for any new reactor we're going to build. Because we don't think that the public is going to accept a new type of nuclear without that problem being solved. And just writing documents about it is not enough. We have to demonstrate that it's doable. But of course, we believe it's doable. So this is why we decided to make something we call the Copenhagen Atomics Wasteburner. And it's basically a molten salt reactor that takes the waste from the light water reactors and extract the plutonium to start a breeder cycle of thorium, and then over many decades we can burn out the actinides. So our team is really strong on chemistry and on measurement technologies and control systems and cost optimizations. And we have this philosophy that we want to be open about what we do. And we want to connect to other teams, and we want to work with other groups, because we know we cannot do this alone. But we hope through collaboration we can get far. And I'm proud to announce that we already made a really nice partnership with Research Center RES in Czech Republic in Prague, just outside of Prague. At that research center, they have 2 nuclear research reactors, and then they have a chemical lab where we are able to do tests with molten salts and fluorine chemistry, with flame reactors, and experiments with thorium and uranium and plutonium. And they even have some salt loops there for testing, and flight salt as well. So it's a great opportunity for us to work with them. And the guys at RES Research Center have several decades of experience with molten salt and fluorine chemistry. And we hope that there's some great work will come out of that collaboration. And through that, we also have been connected to a company in Japan called Thorium Tech Solutions that we want to work with. I also want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Europe. As you might have noticed, thorium energy in Europe has been quite slow to take off, but things are starting to happening now. 2 months ago, we had a symposium in Delft in Holland, where
many of the world's startups were gathered, and I think that was a great opportunity for us to get to know each other a little bit better and exchange thoughts and ideas. And I know of groups in several European countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the UK, Holland, Germany, France, Switzerland, and Czech Republic that are all working on molten salts and thorium energy. So I believe that together across the Atlantic, the Americas and Europeans can work together and try to solve this global problem. I want to talk just a little bit about our reactor design. As we're still a young company, it's still something that is evolving. It's not fully finalized, and you'll see some of the other speakers later on. But in general, the idea is that we have this 40-foot shipping container. Of course, it's not the normal container that they use to ship shoes or whatever around the world. It's a reinforced container that is airtight. And inside the middle one, you see in the middle, it's standing on its end. There you have the reactor core and the primary heat exchangers. And in the container on the right side, you have the chemical reprocessing systems. And in the container at the bottom, you have the dump tanks. And then on the left side, there's a utility container with secondary salts and secondary heat exchangers. And then the idea is we believe that we can fit a 50 megawatt reactor inside the core, inside the container. And then you can have many rows of these. So you can have 10 or 20 rows if you want to have more power. And also the idea is that these reactors should be built inside the fence of existing nuclear power plants so that you don't have to transport the spent nuclear fuel, and it becomes easy to connect to the electrical grid, and you solve some of the problems with security and other stuff because it's already in place. I do want to point out just a few things. For example, below the reactor core, we have a thing we call the Overflow System. It's essentially a different security option. In addition to the freeze plug that we all know and like, the Overflow System is like a bucket, and then all the time you're pumping the salt out of the bucket and around in the loop. But if the pump stops or if the pipes get clotted, then the bucket would overflow and it will flow directly into the dump tank. By having this overflow system, you don't have to worry about how many seconds or minutes it takes for the freeze plug to melt, because as soon as the pump stops, it will overflow into the dump tank. So it's like an additional safety feature. There's also another thing that is maybe a little bit unusual. As soon as we process the fuel salt and take out the fission products, we want to store them, and you see that down in the lower right corner of the dump tanks, we're storing them in vitrified form, so that if there's an accident, earthquake or bombings or whatever you could think of, then it's very hard to imagine how these fission products could spread and harm the nature around it. But I don't have more time to go into details, but I have a poster outside, and I'll try to be next to it in the breaks. So if you have more questions, please come up to me and we can talk more about our idea and design thoughts. So I want to go back to these 5 small stories that I think can change our destiny as a group. The first one is about that there's a very strong correlation between the amount of energy that a given population group have access to and the prosperity of that population group. And I'm sorry to report that I've spoken to many politicians and journalists and even many people in the energy sector, and they don't know this. And some of them even have a hard time believing it. But I believe that, and I think this is the reason. If people don't understand that there's this strong correlation between energy and prosperity, then they see energy as a problem, not as a solution. Whereas many of us, we see the energy as a solution to many of the other problems like hunger and war and refugees and slavery and all these bad things. The second thing is that energy is an agent of change. And many people in society or in the public doesn't know that. They don't know if you just have enough energy, you can turn CO2 and water into jet fuel and green gasoline for your car, or you can turn seawater into drinking water, or you can turn lead into gold. But also very importantly, people think that when you have something that is radioactive, it's going to stay that way for thousands of years. They don't know that it's actually possible to transmute it or fission it and change it into a very different radioactivity profile. And I think if people in the general public, that they don't even know that this is possible, how are they going to make the right choices? So it's important to get those stories out there. And the last, or the third story is that nuclear is safe. I think many of us have seen graphs like this before, but many people in the public doesn't know. But there are good hopes, because we've been able to teach the public that flying on commercial airlines is safer than driving your own car. And even though some people are afraid of flying, they still accept that this truth, that it is safer to fly than to drive. And I think in the same way, I don't think the fear of nuclear will go away anytime soon. But I think we can get people in the public to accept that it's the safest form of energy. And even the molten salt reactors make it much more safe. I'm not saying that these exact numbers are the final answer and correct answer, but I think the profile looks very much like that. So once people in the general public have internalized those first 3 short stories, then I think they're ready to listen to our introduction to thorium energy, where we tell all the great things about thorium energy, that there's plenty of it, and that you can build molten salt reactors and they're very safe and you produce very little waste, and all these good things that we normally talk about thorium energy. And then always the next question I get is, but what does it cost? What is it going to cost? And that is where we as a community have a problem, because we don't have a good answer for that question. And I think we really need to come together as a group and find these answers. And I'm going to suggest that as a result of this conference, we will create a committee of approximately 10 people that will create a report and present it in the conference next year. So the report should be ready, say, 1st May of next year. And in my view, that a report like that should contain at least the following 4 chapters. A chapter about the fuel cost, and a chapter about the bill of materials that is required to build a molten salt reactor, and a chapter about the R&D that is needed to get us from where we are today to a point where we are able to mass manufacture these molten salt reactors. And then chapter number 4 about the regulatory issues and approvals and licensing of the reactors, and how that fit together, and how it's different from licensing the old type of reactors, and how it's different between different countries. So I think a report like that would help us a lot in the debate with the general public. So I want to ask you, how many of you would like to read such a report next year? Okay, I see many hands, more than half.
When should the first rough draft be circulated?
We'll find out. So I want to ask the next question. Who of you know a friend or a colleague, or maybe yourself, who you want to propose as a member of that committee? Can you put your hand up if you know some people? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thanks. I see more than 10 hands. So I accept that as an answer, that we at this conference to try to make such a committee and try to create this report. I know the first version of the report is not going to be perfect, but at least it's much better than what we have today, and it's a step in the right direction. So I want to ask those of you who had your hands up, please come over to me in the break. I will be out here in the courtyard, and give me your business card, and then we will find out how to set up the committee. And then I want to end with some final words about why I think so that thorium energy is great. And it started 500,000 years ago, when the great apes figured out how to control fire and how to cook food. And when they did that, they were able to get more energy out of the food. And then they had bigger brains, and that's essentially when the humans arrived on this planet in history. And then fast forward the next 500,000 years, there wasn't any great step changes. But then suddenly some people invented the steam engine and the diesel engine. And you all know how that changed everything in the society and how it created the modern industrialized society. Because suddenly we don't have to spend the whole day in the field doing human labor, and we didn't need the working horse. Suddenly we got the energy from fossil fuels. And I believe that the next step change we will see on this planet, the next major step change, will be when we get enough energy, plentiful of energy hopefully from thorium, then the cost of energy will come down to almost nothing. And when you're in a situation where you have lots of energy and it costs almost nothing, it's going to change everything it means to be human. It's going to affect every system and every culture we have on this planet. And I think it's going to happen in my lifetime. And that excites me a lot. And it makes me breathless. But what's even more great is that we have a chance to be part of this, to be part of this group of people who are going to make it happen. I think that is awesome. Thank you.
We have a couple moments for questions if you want to hit him up.
One of the promises of thorium fluoride liquid reactor is the fact that it's explosion-proof. Can you explain for the naive newcomer why there must be an airtight container around the new experimental waste burner?
Why do we need an airtight container around this molten salt reactor, basically? We use these fluorine salts, and fluorine is not a thing you want to have inhale, but also there's xenon and krypton. That is, gases that can come out of the salt, so you don't want those to escape into nature. And in general, the fission products in this molten salt that is pumped around is very, very radioactive, especially in the first minutes just after the fission. So that's why you want it to be airtight. And we have this rule that you want to have at least 3 layers between the fuel salt and the nature outside, so that you have to, in the event of some accident, you have to break 3 layers before you get into nature. I hope that answers your question.
So regarding the cost estimate of the MSR, there are some variations amongst the MSR class. Are you looking to do a cost estimate? It looks like from your design you're going with some variation of the MSRE. Are you looking to do a cost estimate for the MSRE? Also, regarding the MSRE, there have been 4 cost estimates done, at least 4, spread out through the last 40 years. The last one was done by Ralph Moore in 2002. Would you be looking to continue that and go into more detail what Ralph Moore done for the MSRE?
I think you asked in regards to the committee thing I suggest. Of course there's different designs, and I think what really affects the price of those different designs is how many years they're designed to live for. But of course we can write about that in a report in the chapter, that if we have available the components that are needed for those different designs, we can try to estimate how the price is different. But I'm not saying it's an easy task, but I think it can be done. And of course we have to build on the work that has already been made.
Hi, how's it going? What has the response been to your efforts by the Danish government? I would just be...
No response at all. Before we started the group, we have tried several times to set up talks and meetings where we invited journalists and politicians. And sometimes we were able to get journalists to come, but we haven't been able to get any politicians to come yet. And in my mind, it makes perfectly sense, because politicians are in the business of getting a seat at the next election. And promoting thorium energy is not a good way to get a seat at the next election. So for a politician, it doesn't make sense to go there unless at least, I don't know, 25, 30, 40% of the population start to like the idea of thorium energy. So I don't expect the politicians to move on this anytime soon. But I see many people in the general public that are moving on it. And I think as we get the information out there of what thorium energy is and what it can do, it's starting to change the people's thoughts towards nuclear.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.